Good morning. My name is Will Robinson. I'm the current chair of the Chamber's Legislative Committee. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to this preview of the upcoming legislative session. I can't believe we're here. It seems like we were just here a couple months ago. You'll find the Chamber's legislative priorities at your seat. The committee I just introduced, we will be heading to Tallahassee in January, and we will work on the following priorities. Technical school funding formula revisions. We want to make it performance-based. MTI has been underfunded by nearly $4 million until the past year's session when we got a temporary reprieve. The formula needs to be changed for good and for equity reasons. We also want to maintain a competitive and favorable business and economic development climate. International targeting remains important, and regulatory reform such as unemployment and workers' compensation reform is important. We also want to close the loophole on internet sales collections. And finally, since 1998, $3.5 billion has been diverted away from the Transportation Trust Fund for other purposes. Let's keep it intact and spread more monies to our region, such as a 25-cent increase on the Skyway Bridge, which is slated to take place next June, and for projects like the Port Manatee Connect.
County Veterans Council for their unwavering service.
Last year, legislators' job creation has to be a substantive centerpiece. Every time you cast your vote on a bill, ask yourself and your colleagues, does it strengthen free enterprise, does it create jobs, or does it undermine our free enterprise system? Next, I'd like to introduce our legislative delegation. Legislators, please keep your thoughts concise to 6 minutes each, and we'll save all of our questions till all the legislators have had a chance to speak. You'll see the guidelines at your table regarding questions and answers. I guess the two main rules are ask a question and ask the question at the microphone. We can't just have you stand up because you can't get picked up by the television. First up to the podium, and I'd like to say that I think we have a record participation and audience today, so that's wonderful. And I do believe it's because we're here to listen to the wise wisdom of Senator Bennett and his last preview legislative session. We've just so enjoyed having your thoughts and comments. So first up to the podium for the last preview is Senator Mike Bennett.
Don't throw me out yet.
Preview, I said.
I can't believe you all get up this hour of the morning and come and do this. I get up this hour of the morning and go to work. We're in the construction business. We do that. It's been an interesting year so far, even through our committee sessions up there, because the bills have been moving very, very slow. And I think the bills have been moving slow because what of the major problems that we're dealing with, obviously the budget and redistricting. And you'll hear a lot of comments. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions down redistricting. We'll handle them. But one of the things that's come out was what's going to happen with my Senate district. My Senate district was the most convoluted in the state. And it really, truly was, going all the way down to Lee County. And I remember the people in Lee County were complaining because they felt that they wanted their own senator, okay? That's the person who would fight the hardest for them. And it just so happens my polling numbers in Lee County are actually higher than they are up here, okay? Because a Florida state senator doesn't represent just one person. It doesn't represent one county. And I know that, in fact, Senator or soon-to-be Senator Galvano, I hope, he and I visited on that, because when we looked at the maps that they were going to be drawn for all of Manatee County, there's a part of me that really, really, really likes the idea that Manatee County will finally have its own senator. We won't be dividing the thing up. But on the same token, the question came up, what are you going to do with Lakewood Ranch? Because it's going to be divided in two. I think Lakewood Ranch is actually going to benefit because they will have two of the strongest senators in the state coming out of there. And when you're walking in the Florida Senate and you're doing a vote and you've got 2 out of 40 starting out, that's not a bad way to start your day. and when you've got two strong people fighting for it. So the redistricting thing will change. I don't say that this is the final map that you're looking at. I think it's a long way from it. At the end of the day, the courts are going to end up drawing it, because already the people who were pushing Amendment 5 and 6 are realizing that in order to protect the Voting Rights Act and the minority seats in the state, we had to, by definition, you have to gerrymander the district. You can't do it any other way. And so they wanted you not to gerrymander, and yet they're going to sue you if you don't gerrymander. And so you're trying to figure out how to do this deal. And so I really feel sorry for the people. I know Senator Dieter's not here this morning, but I know some of the other members up here are on redistricting, Jimmy and a couple of others. It's a very, very difficult process. So be patient. We know we have a deadline. It will get done. It's just like the budget. The budget will get done. Sometimes it doesn't appear that we're moving, and you're keeping saying, when are you going to get something done? Believe me, in the little back rooms and the secret handshake clubs that, you know, we're not supposed to do, that's where it all gets done, and it will get done. And we will figure out ways to do it. So the big issues, obviously, are the budget and redistricting. The budget's going to be another couple $2 billion short. And as you're trying to protect this, one of the things that you talked about just a second, Will, was like the Internet Trust Fund, or excuse me, the Transportation Trust Fund. Say, well, don't touch that. Well, I got to tell you, when I have a choice of buying books for a kid in the 3rd grade who can never repeat it, or putting enough money in there to widen the road out here, I'm going to buy the books for the kid in the 3rd grade, and I'll always vote for that. So those are some of the tough choices you have. I mean, we don't want to touch those trust funds. It's by definition trust. And then you say, well, why do you keep rating it? Well, unfortunately, in these times, we got to find money where we can, and then you have to start prioritizing. And some of my priorities may not be your priorities, and some of mine may not be Jimmy's, and Jimmy's might not be mine, but you bounce through them, and we try to figure out, how do we protect the weakest, the most vulnerable? How do we protect education? How do we protect our kids? And if we have to put something else on the back burner for a little while, you just hopefully slide it back. So I think we will be looking at the budget. It'll be tough. I'm working on the internet sales tax, and I know that the governor would like to get rid of the corporate sales or the corporate taxes. I'm saying if we do an internet sales tax, if revenue is the problem, because that's been the problem through the Florida legislature, they don't want an increase in revenue, unfortunately, because they often go out and spend it. I'm saying if we're going to have an internet sales tax, let's make it where everybody benefits, not just the corporations. And for every dollar that we increase in the internet sales tax revenue, let's decrease it in the sales tax. That way everybody in the state of Florida benefits, not just the major corporations. And that wouldn't matter if it was Joe the plumber or if it's XYZ corporation. Everybody would benefit. There would be an offset. And so we're kind of working our way through that. And then I hope to be working on energy. And last but not least, my swan song, I want people to get the hell out of the left lane. It'll be a good year.
Right. Next up to the podium is Representative Jim Boyd, District 68.
Thank you. Thanks, Will. And Senator, I thought you told me in Tallahassee all of my priorities were priorities for you. So, okay, good, good. I wanted to clear that up in front of all these. Perfect. So I see how this goes. Thank you for having us this morning. It's a pleasure to be back. I think the senator, we could all probably sit down and just say he summed it up pretty well. But still, as a freshman, it's still a very interesting process for many of us. And as Senator Bennett said, the budget and redistricting are going to be the overarching issues. It seems that's pretty much all you've read about in the paper lately. The Senate President says we may have to come back to finish the budget, after session ends. Speaker of the House has said publicly that he thinks we can accomplish that during the regular session. There's many of us that hope, and I'm sure there's plenty in the Senate that hope the same thing, that we can get all of that done, in the regular session this year. So those are going to be the two primary issues. And it's interesting, as Senator said, there's lots of us that have bills that are important to communities, important to constituencies and different groups that we're trying to move, and there isn't a whole lot moving very fast right now. I've got one bill that's been heard. It's going to be heard twice. It's been heard by one committee, and I'm waiting on the schedule today, but I'm hoping it'll be heard by the second committee and the final committee next week. And that's a little bit unusual right now because there's just not much moving very fast, but a lot of it is due to the redistricting issue. And with that, as you know, the Senate maps, and the Senator just talked about them, have come out. The House committee, I'm on the Senate committee for the House, and we're meeting next week, and we expect to have our, kind of substantive, I think, maps out then. to have start the dialogue and the discussion. And there will be, I think, a lot of give and take as we move along. You may think that they're generally probably good right now, but there's got to be a lot of it that gets kind of talked about and worked through. As Mike said a year and a half ago at a campaign talk, I remember his point was very good. It's like, what's fair to you is not going to be fair to me, and what's fair to me is not going to be fair to Representative Pilon. So there's just got to be some give and take, and I hope that the courts will look at it in that frame of mind when it gets there, and know that this isn't a perfect science, and we've got to do something that's good for our communities, good for our state, and good for our friends and neighbors, but it just cannot be absolutely perfect. So our goal is to make it as perfect as possible, but that's going to be a challenge. The budget, again, a couple $1 billion shortfall. We went into the summer thinking that we were in pretty good shape this year for a kind of a revenue, maybe neutral year, but early numbers are in that are suggesting otherwise. That could change, and I think maybe that's what President Herodopoulos was thinking, that as we move through the early spring, maybe those numbers would improve a little bit. So that may be some of his thinking in terms of that may need to be stretched out a little bit, but we'll just have to wait and see on that. A couple things we're working on this year. Last year, I think I told you I was working on PIP reform. There's a big fraud issue with personal injury protection, the coverage you have to buy to operate a motor vehicle in Florida. It's a $1 billion fraud industry. We have got to get our arms around that. That's costing every driver in the state of Florida more money than they deserve to pay. And the irony of the thing, and the sad part of the issue is, the people that can afford it the least are the ones that are paying the most. So those among us who can ill afford to pay these increased premiums in the inner cities and the minority areas of our communities that are working, sometimes 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet, they're the ones that are getting hit the hardest. Their premiums are the highest. Their costs are more than probably mine or yours as we're sitting here today. So we've got to get our arms around that. The governor is firmly behind it. The CFO is firmly behind it. I was telling Representative Pilon as we were sitting here, if you don't see me next year, there's a couple of groups that you might want to start looking at that maybe had done something with me. But it's a problem. It's a $10,000 medical payment for someone that gets hurt in a car accident without regard to fault or liability. That's what it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to make practitioners rich. It's not supposed to make attorneys rich. It's a medical payment to cover somebody's injury when they're hurt in a car accident, and that's what it's got to get back to. And if it can't get back to that, there's a pretty wide notion in Tallahassee that I'm hearing that we repeal it and get rid of it and do something different. And then those that are after me will really be maybe after somebody else then, because the repeal then nobody will have a chance at it. I'm not saying there's not room for attorneys at the table. If somebody just can't get their insurance company or their provider to cooperate with them, absolutely, you ought to have a remedy for that. No question about that. But those folks shouldn't be the first ones at the table trying to get paid when the benefits are being used up on those issues versus medical injuries. So for several other things, gaming is going to be kind of an interesting issue to watch, I think, this year. And it's just kind of a philosophical issue, I think, with most people. There's a big push from a well-funded group to look at that, and you've read all about the Miami issue. So our friend Representative Galvano, and I hope as well soon to be Senator Galvano, worked hard on this over the years with the gaming pact that we have with the Seminoles. And my personal opinion right now is an agreement's an agreement. That we've made an agreement, we need to stand by it. In the future, we'll look at other things, but we do have an agreement in place. So we'll see how that works out. And then, last but not least, we're there to serve you. If there's anything that you need that we can help you with, I mean, we still have hopes and anticipation that we can get things done this year. And I know your team that is here today is working hard to do that for you. So if there's anything that's important to you, we hope to see you. We hope to hear from you, because we hear a lot from the Tallahassee folks, but you all are the ones that are the group that put us there and that we serve. So we hope to hear from you and hear what's important to you. So please call us, and I'm sure there'll be some questions we'd be happy to answer as we go along. But thank you for being here, and appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Thanks, Jim. One thing I forgot to mention, and it hasn't happened yet, please silence your cell phones. So one thing I was told to say and I forgot. Next to the podium is Representative Ray Pilon, District 69.
Morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. You're right, Mike. I have no idea why they get up this early and do this, but coffee's made me halfway awake, so I hope I can be coherent to you today. Thanks for having us here as usual. Didn't think I was going to be able to make it, but the conference that I was at my obligations got done a little bit early, so I made sure that I could come and visit with you today because I think this is a great group. You have a lot of great ideas, you got a lot of problems, and we can't solve them all for you, but and I've heard the senator say this in the past in some of our delegation meetings. We know what the problems are. We probably agree with most of them when it comes to business and it comes to the things that you're talking about like health care and workers' comp and all of the things that unemployment insurance and all of the things that you deal with. Help us with the solutions. Do it early. This idea about bills not getting done. Well, I'm a freshman, so I can say this. What's that? What's up with that? I'm not on the redistricting committee. I'm not in the back room. I've got committee meetings. I've got bills slated to be heard. And all of a sudden, everything's at a stop. I don't get it. If I do get it and I find out why that is, I'll let you know. Because a lot of us have great bills here, and perhaps the senator, although, Mike, I think it was a lot different 10 years ago. We didn't have these two amendments to deal with, for one. But
We just carved it up in the back room.
yeah, and so, and then when they did that, it was just kind of like because they had to argue with each other so much to get it done. So I'm hopeful that that normal bills that are good policy and good solutions for our community and for our state will move forward. I mean, every year we have about 3,000 bills that get filed. We know there's only going to be about 300 of them that make it. We only have to do the budget. That's one. Now this year we have to do 2 redistricting. So 2, that leaves 298 slots left. So we'll see what happens. Just very briefly on the internet sales tax. On board with that, we did go to a budget briefing, the House budget briefing, and the question that we asked was, well, how much money would that get us in the state of Florida? Against how much would it cost us to implement it? Because you have to do a national program and some real issues with that. But about 5 years ago, maybe later, I can't remember exactly what they said. They did a study, and it they figured this time around we'd probably gain about $50 million a year. And it would cost $50 million a year to implement the program nationwide. So I hope that's not the case, because why would we go to all that effort if it's going to be a wash? Then we would be losing dollars by giving tax relief on the other side. I hope that budget estimate or those figures that we got are not correct, and that we can, Florida Retail Association and the Chamber and everybody else will come forward with some real facts and figures that show how that would not only protect our local merchants, but bring revenue that we are already owed. It's not a new tax. We're already owed that, but just like my wife, she says, there's a form, I'm supposed to fill it out? Yeah, right. Not going to do that, because it's your responsibility. Finally, I just want to talk about the water management district issue that you have. As you know, I've, in my day job, worked with the water management district for years, and think that the water management districts and their cooperative funding, in particular here in Southwest Florida, is great. I think it's a shared issue when you're trying to build infrastructure, that the local governments, local regional governments and local governments and the water management district can share in that cost. The collaborative funding is probably one of the best examples in the United States. Recently, the water management district decided that they weren't going to have appointed basin boards, because for those of you who don't know, it's a subgroup of the Water Management District Governing Board. As a result of that, they didn't tax you with any ad valorem this year if you look on your trim notices. That doesn't mean that they still don't exist. The boundaries are still in place. The ability to use ad valorem taxes locally, if they choose to do so, is there. Not the responsibility of the legislature, however. So if you're concerned about that issue and would like to see those local dollars come back here, they're going to do it this year because there's a lot of reserves. But there was no millage for the basin boards for Manatee, Sarasota next year, regardless of whether you have appointed members or not on a basin board. We can distribute those dollars locally if they're collected locally. In fact, the Water Management District will tell you that if ad valorem taxes are collected within what was called the Minnesota Basin, they have to go back out in that basin. They can't go to Polk County or someplace else unless it's a regional issue that everybody benefits from. So I'll be very attentive to that, because I know it's on your list here. And then just finally, what the senator said is true. You know, we have by the Constitution requirements of what we have to fund. Unfortunately, transportation is not one of them. So when you're at $2 billion down and you have to balance that budget, you have to make choices. You know, whether it's there's doing things right and then the right thing. Well, in this case, it's equal with both of us because we have constitutional requirements to fund education, healthcare, and public safety. Then, at the same time, balance that budget and then try not to hit your pocketbooks with any new fees or taxes, and I don't think you're going to see that. So look forward to working with you. Come to us with your ideas and your solutions, and hope to see you in Tallahassee. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Greg Stubbe, District 67.
Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. I feel like, I've only been to 3, 4, 5 of these as an elected official, and it feels like I've been doing this now for like 5 years because we've had so many of these. And it's great to see so much participation. Last one we had, the line stopped in the mid back there, so it's good to see people all the way back to the wall, and that you're interested in what's going on in your state, and you're interested in what's going on and how it affects your county. I want to tell you a little bit about what committees I serve on this year because it's different than last year, and then I'll tell you a little bit about some of the bills that I have, and then I'm looking forward to some of your questions. Like you've heard some of us talk about the gaming issue. It's a big thing that's starting to be talked about in Tallahassee, yet I haven't heard from anybody in my district about how they feel about that, which is kind of odd. You haven't seen too many articles in the local papers about it. You've seen some in the statewide papers, but not in the local papers. So I'd love to hear from some of our local elected officials, some of our local leaders here in the community, how they feel about resort gambling and bringing something like that to the state of Florida. Because the bill as it is right now would only affect Miami and Dade counties and Broward counties. So it wouldn't necessarily be here, but it's certainly the camel under the tent. And if we do it there, it certainly could pop up in other parts of the state after that. So it'd be nice to hear some feedback from you all as it relates to that. This year I sit on finance and tax, I sit on healthcare appropriations, I sit on justice appropriations, energy and utilities, and I sit on the water committee with Representative Pilon. I sit on, if you count finance and tax, I sit on 3 appropriations committees. And as you've heard from other members up here, we're looking at another deficit. When we cut $4.5 billion from the state budget last year, we thought, if we cut this and we make these difficult choices and we cut where we need to cut, hopefully when we come back next year, we'll at least be flat. Well, of course, that's not where we're at. And we're looking at about a $1.6 billion shortfall. And from sitting on healthcare appropriations last year and now doing that again, it's difficult to sit back and really make decisions on where we're going to cut the budget and where we're going to make those hard decisions. So stay involved with that discussion with us, and please stay in communication with us as those issues move forward in the process, because it's going to be a challenge to cut again after we cut $4.5 billion last year. One of my big bills, and I'll talk about the internet tax bill first, I'm actually filing the internet tax language in the House. So I'm glad to see that it's one of the Chamber's priorities. And one of the reasons that I decided to file that bill, when I sit on 3 county delegations, I sit on Hillsborough, Manatee, and Sarasota because I represent portions of all those counties. And in each of the delegation meetings, I can't tell you how many people came to those delegation meetings, and a lot of these guys that were sitting up here heard this and said, we really need to fix this loophole. And this is what it is to me. We can talk about revenue, we can talk about tax, but this is what it is to me. If you're a local business in Bradenton or in Manatee County and you sell a product online, you have to remit the sales tax to the state of Florida. You're required to do it because you're here in the state of Florida. If you're Amazon or another company out of state and you sell a product into the state of Florida, you don't have to remit that sales tax because you're not here in the state of Florida. You're supposed to, under the law, if you purchase that, but people don't do that, and we understand why they don't do that. So to me, it's a fairness issue for small businesses in the state of Florida, and that's why the Florida Retail Federation is supporting it, that's why your chamber is supporting it, that's why the Florida Chamber is supporting it, and all these business groups are saying, hey, look, there's a lot of revenue here that these businesses that are located outside of our jurisdiction are not remitting sales tax to the state that is required to be remitted to our state. So that's why I decided to file the bill, and I think it's going to be interesting as we move forward based on some of the senators' comments, which I agree with. If we're going to balance it and take some of that revenue, and we need to balance it with some other sales tax issues. So it'll be interesting to see as we move forward how that bill is going to develop. And I believe that Senator Dietert is filing my companion language in the Senate. So as we move forward, that'll be an interesting bill to watch as we move through the process, because the bills aren't moving as fast as they were last year. This time last year, we have one more committee week left before session starts in January. At this time last year, I had already presented 3 or 4 or 5 bills in committees, some bills in multiple committees, and I already had stuff through the committee process ready to be voted on in the House. This year, most of my bills are filed. I have had several bills that have been sitting in drafting for probably months to pop out of drafting, and that wasn't what was happening that last year. And it's because of all these other things that are going on. You've got the reapportionment, you've got the gaming language, you've got all these things going on. So it'll be an interesting year to see how many of these members' bills make it through the process, because now we're almost down to the 60-day window, and committees aren't going to meet probably all the way through session. One of the other bills that I want to talk about real quick, and then I'll sit down, we'll hear from Representative Rousson and take your questions, is something that's important to me and I see as a very important piece to our economy in the state of Florida, and that's the foreclosure crisis that we are facing in the state of Florida. As most of you know, I'm an attorney. I do real estate law, and I do a lot of real estate litigation. And I think from an economic standpoint, we still have so many foreclosures that are stuck in the court process, or that are stuck as abandoned homes, or that are stuck and our economy is not really able to recover because there's so much real estate that's either in the market or sitting there or abandoned or going through the court foreclosure process. I personally have cases that I'm an attorney on that have been sitting in the court process for 3 to 4 years that have been just sitting there. And, you know, there's different reasons as to why that is. So I'm doing a foreclosure bill that I drafted every bit of the language myself and spent several weeks trying to come up with a solution. Now, it's not going to have all the right answers, and I'm looking forward to, after we get it filed, having discussions with all the key players as we move forward. I've already talked to the Bankers Association. I've talked to some attorneys who represent just homeowners. It's going to address deficiency judgments. It's going to address how procedurally things go through the court, as far as how long it's supposed to take, put timelines on these cases so that these things can move through the process. And then it's going to put in some protections for homesteaded owners, only homesteaded owners. If it is your homesteaded property and it is your home that you live in and it's owner occupied, give some due process protection to the people that live in those homes to make sure that they're not being taken advantage of. So those are the 2 big bills that I'm working on as we move through the process next year. I'm looking forward to that because those are going to be some big issues. And it's going to be interesting to see how those issues work through the process when you have all these other bigger issues like reapportionment and the budget going on. One quick other thing I do want to mention, I'm sending out a pre-session survey via email. I send out an email blast. Some of you probably get some of my emails. I'm sending out a pre-session survey either this week or next week. If I don't have your email address, please either email me or get it to me or hand it to me, because I really want to know what you are feeling on all these issues. I'll have questions as it relates to gaming. I'll have questions as it relates to the internet tax. I'll have questions as it relates to the budget. All of the different things going on that we may see this year in the legislature. And it's, our job is to be a representative of this community. And I can't do that adequately unless I hear from people in my district to be able to represent you correctly. So I would encourage you to fill that pre-session survey out that we're going to send out in the next 2 weeks so we can get some feedback on where you are at in the community as it relates to these very important issues. It's an honor to be here with you today. I look forward to your questions, and thank you for having us.
Thank you, Representative. And last but certainly not least, Representative Darrell Rousson.
Thank you very much, and good morning. I always enjoy being last but not least. You know, Representative Stubbe was onto something when he talked about engagement and involvement. And it reminded me, I was driving one day, about the pie and the pie shape that we always see in PowerPoints that talk about slices of the budget and what's going to be here and there. And it occurred to me that PIE, P-I-E, stands for participation, involvement, and engagement. And if you want a piece of the pie, that's what you have to do. And so, Representative Stubbe, thank you for reminding all of us of that lesson. And that's important. Look, I might be the only Democrat standing up here. But I wouldn't have missed this. See, I've made it every year since I've been elected. And what I understand is, see, being one of 39 Democrats in the House of Republicans, it's not about how many bills you pass. Matter of fact, it's really about the quality of the legislation that goes through, not the number. And frankly, our victory, and this is what I tell the other Democrats, our victory is in showing up. Our victory is in strong advocacy for the principles that we stand for, the people of the district that I represent. And I represent 4 counties. And I have to take into consideration the southernmost tip of Hillsborough, Ruskin, and Riverview, and the needs of that community, and Midtown in St. Petersburg, and Newtown in Sarasota, and the Memphis area of Manatee, and the affluent water areas that go along with that. And that's why I enjoy representing this district. You know, they talked about some of the important things that are going to hit session, but let me tell you about the single most important item, and that's the budget. And let me tell you about the other single most important item, and that's redistricting. And then the other single most important item is gaming. And the last single most important item is PIP fraud. And look, all of us want to get rid of the fraud. We understand the intent and the purpose behind personal injury protection, and it's significant. But we want to get rid of the fraud. And ever since I served on Tax and Budget Reform Commission and pushed the internet sales tax, I predict it will pass this year because the climate is right. When I leave here today, I'm going straight to Tampa. The National Conference of State Legislators is having some committee meetings there, and I'll be joining Senator Schmidt out of Kansas and Representative Tilley out of Kentucky, talking about the K2 spice. And since I was one of the main sponsors of the bill here to get rid of synthetic marijuana, they've asked me to join a panel to talk about what we're doing here in Florida, including our prescription database monitoring, because we got to get a grip on the deaths that are occurring in Tampa Bay. And this stuff is an equal opportunity destroyer. Has nothing to do with ethnicity, educational attainment, economic attainment of families, but has everything to do with the human issues of addiction. And any of you who read Senator Negron's comments in September, at the beginning of committee week, the cannon has been shot across the bow. Social programs, programs that deal with drug treatment, programs that deal with domestic violence, programs that deal with homelessness are first on the chopping block. And I'm not so sure that's very genuine at a time when our economy and our communities are suffering the way they are. And so I'm not going to Tallahassee with the idea that I'm going to file 6 bills and all 6 going to pass. And I feel sorry for those legislators who are going to suffer heartburn because they don't have bills going through. But there will be significant opportunity to provide counterpoint, to provide statesmanship instead of political gamesmanship in this session. And I look forward to the fight. When I go there for the 60 days, I don't come home on the weekends. I stay right there because I found out what you can get done on Saturday and Sunday when the other legislators aren't around. This is going to be a tough session, and I echo the comments of my colleagues, but you know what? We were all raised in tough times. I serve on Maine appropriations, and at the end of the day, all of the issues, whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's justice, comes through Maine appropriations, and I take that job very seriously. I serve on justice appropriations, and dealing with Department of Corrections, Department of Juvenile Justice, Florida Highway Patrol, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, all of the court system, all of the state attorneys, all the public defenders, and the clerks of court. It's heavy responsibility. Our courts are in trouble right now. And we've got to do something to shore up the third branch of government to make it feel like it is a co-equal branch of government. Because the men and women who wear the robes, who mete out justice, work hard. And as a legislature, we've got to do better in our court system. I also serve on Business and Consumer Services Subcommittee. And that's where gaming and a lot of business issues will come in front of us. Last year, deregulation was the big topic. This year it's going to be about how can we shore up small businesses. In fact, I have some legislation that should come out of drafting next week. It's called an L3C corporation. 10 states have passed it. Florida's looking at it. But it will help shore up our nonprofits. See, the critical mission of our nonprofits has not gone away and not gotten any less, whether it's domestic violence or whether it's homelessness or any of the traditional missions of the nonprofits. But our nonprofits are struggling to stay open. Donations are drying up and tanking and clearly going away in some instances. And we've got to find a way to keep those jobs that these nonprofits allow in our community, keep their mission going at a time when donations are dropping. And I think that's important. So I'm not going to take much longer, but I just wanted you to know that I didn't feel slighted when they didn't have my name tag here for me today. I don't feel slighted when they say last but not least. Because my mama always say, son, tell them to love you or hate you, but don't ignore you.
Okay, now is your time. We have 20-plus minutes for questions and answers, and like I said previously, please rise and go to the mic to ask your question.
I understand that you're going to be voting on a bill involving ethanol. I guess it's H.R. 4013. I feel like ethanol has raised the prices of our food. It's ruining our gas, our engines, and that we really need some help on this.
Man, you were really on top of things. I didn't even know that bill was on until yesterday when I got the notice that it was on the committee roster, and the bill sponsor actually text messaged me yesterday. It's Representative Gates is sponsoring that bill, and he text messaged me yesterday, and he says, hey, Stubbe, are you going to support my bill in committee? And I said, I haven't even read it yet because we just got the notice yesterday on it. He said that the agricultural groups, he was explaining it to me, and he said the agricultural groups actually support it because of some of the things that it does, but some of the environmental groups are going to oppose it because of some of the other things it does to affect the environment. So I will definitely look into that in more detail and would love to hear your opinion on what you think the state should do. You know, we're in a really interesting time because I've sat on energy and utilities now for 2 years, and we worked all year last year to do a comprehensive energy policy. And we voted it through, we worked on it, we got it through committee, and it had a bunch of renewable energy provisions in that bill. And then they got word that the governor wouldn't sign it because it would give some of the utility companies the ability to raise rates. So it died. So we did all that work on a comprehensive energy policy, and it went nowhere. And as many of you may or may not know, the state of Florida, as big as we are and as diverse as we are, does not have a comprehensive energy policy in the state that incorporates all these things. So I'd love to hear your opinion on that. And since it just came out yesterday, I'll look at that bill in more detail, and we'll see as it moves forward. But I had been told, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the agriculture industry was supporting it.
Right.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Sharon Hillstrom with the Manatee Economic Development Council, and this question goes to all of you. Like to hear your opinion on the Workforce Accountability Act and how you expect that will impact us locally.
This is always the fun part of my job. It's like the professor. Does anyone want to take on that question?
So I think if you would give us a little more indication of what that act does, then I'm sure it would come back and refresh the members' minds.
Okay, what it is I guess the governor wants to have more control over who sits on the workforce boards, and the concern is that that comes from the county commission typically, so we're concerned that the local control will be going away.
I think basically what you're talking about is we had some situations where some of the workforce development boards were spending money like it wasn't theirs, like so many other people do in government, and that was exactly what was happening. And some of the expenses that they were having, and you know, that money is supposed to go to help people find jobs, not to buy new cars for people who are serving on the committee, not executive directors. It's not supposed to go to buy, you know, $10 donuts and $20 cups of coffee and those kinds of things. And so we had some very serious problems on that. On the same token, we also realized that the workforce development boards work best because their board is primarily made up of local people, local business people who have the feel of the community. So though I support the workforce strongly. I used to be on the workforce board here in Sarasota. I think that we have to find a way to make sure that there is some accountability for the funds that we're sending down. And in some areas of the state, we did not have that. It just so happened here on the Gulf Coast, we did pretty darn good. Once you got a little bit north of Tampa, we had some problems up there. There were certainly some problems over in Orlando, but we are on top of it. And we want to make sure that there is accountability, because before there truly was no accountability. They were given a blank check and said, here's your money, go spend it as you want. And they did. Mm-hmm. And so we decided we have a different want than they do. Okay. So that's what we're going to do. Yes, and the size of the boards kept on growing and growing and growing, and they just kept expanding and expanding, and it became more of a social network instead of concentrating on the job. One of the problems we face on a lot of these boards, and we truly do face a lot of these boards, we have too many people who serve on voluntary boards to pad their resume instead of getting the job done. And so I think we're going to try to take a little more active role in when we make these appointments, okay, that they truly do have the best interest of their particular geographical, their mission at heart than we have had in the past. And it's been pretty loose.
Okay, thank you.
Sharon, I'll say one additional thing, and thanks for jogging our memory on names and whatnot. But on economic affairs, a variety of the players in the economic development arm of our state and communities came before our committee and presented. And I can't tell you I'm speaking for the governor because I'm not, but I do know there's an effort on his part and his staff's part to bring all of those economic driver groups to the table at the same time, and that's kind of evident with what he's done with reorganizing those departments in Tallahassee. And in fact, there was some workforce folks that came at one point and talked. So, you know, I trust, and we'll try to keep our eye on it as well, that those folks and the local folks and the boards will be, community input will be solicited and relied upon, because I think he understands, and I think we do as well. That's all part of the big picture. But I think the effort is to try to consolidate so we don't have this arm doing this and that arm doing that. And then, of course, the problems that the senator mentioned were there as well. But I trust that that's taking place, but we'll keep our eye on it as well from the House side.
Okay, thank you.
My first question is to Representative Pilon. As a member who did at one point in time serve on the Peace River Water Management Authority and fully understand the how important it is that there is regional cooperation in producing the water that's going to be needed. Maybe not right now because we're in this economic slump, but we won't stay here forever. What are the plans for bringing back the viability of funding for those boards that have the input to maintain that local control?
Representative?
Thank you, Jane. And as you know, yeah, I've been involved in both as a staffer and as an elected official on the Peace River Minnesota Regional Water Supply Authority, of which Manatee County is a critical member. Regionalization is important. We build a 6 billion gallon reservoir. We build a plant. We did that with regional cooperation and funding from both the governing board and the basin boards in the past. Just to reiterate again, what she's talking about is last year, appointments weren't being made to fill slots in basin boards. They're local. 4 members, was 6, now 4 for the Minnesota Basin Board, which took ad valorem taxes that you paid and put them into local projects, mainly. Could be anything from conservation to whatever. And some of that was shared with funds that came from the district ad valorem taxes that you pay if they were of a larger concern, but specific to your area. The Basin Board's appointees went away with a stroke of a pen and a vote by 13 members of the governing board of the Southwest Florida Water Management District. Have heart. And also, the millage went away because they were told they had to cut their millage. So rather than cutting it on a wide basis, they just did away with the millage for all the basin boards. Those basin boundaries still exist in statute. The language about how many members still exists. Now, you're going to get mad at me because I've got a repealer bill that does away with those 4 members, because there aren't any. Because when it comes back, if it comes back to local representation, maybe we need 5, maybe we need 6, maybe we only need 2. So it ties us too much. So I'm in favor of the local ad valorem taxation that was there for years. It's not new tax, it's not anything like that, because it benefits locally. Legislatively, I don't think there's a whole bunch I can do about what the policy of the Water Management District does on whether they assess those or not. Now, having said that, we've seen that the state legislature and the governor has had some influence over ad valorem issues with the water management districts, be they negative in many cases. So we'll continue to keep an eye on it because, you know, I'm a proponent.
And regionalism in that area is real. I have one more question.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
behind
Representative Stubbe, we talk about the need for internet sales tax, expanding our tax base by that, and you said you were drafting that bill. My question becomes, when we talk about the cost to us, and someone mentioned it, it's a 50-50. Can you expand a little bit more? That is basically dealt through like a federal type of, I'm not sure I fully understand. I know it's a very important because we are losing many, many dollars. I want to say billion, but I don't want to exaggerate, but I know we're losing a lot of dollars to that in that arena.
And it's complicated when you get into what the current law is and what it requires. As Representative Pilon had said, that his wife buys something online and then you're supposed to fill out a form and remit it. You're supposed to do that. That's a requirement by law, but nobody does, and it's not enforced. And then you have the people who are brick and mortar businesses in the state of Florida that sell things online who have to remit the sales tax because they are a Florida company. If they're a company outside of the state, they don't have to do that because there's a loophole in the current law as it relates to them remitting that tax. But there's a huge amount of equity there, in my opinion. I think from the state of Florida, we should be supporting Florida businesses as much as we can to improve our economy and not helping out large businesses that are located outside of our state that aren't having to remit a sales tax and having to not compete with local vendors. So it's gonna change considerably because we're probably going to take into account some of the things that Senator Bennett had mentioned with if we're increasing revenue based on the income that would come in from those business remittance, then we're going to decrease the amount of sales tax that you as the consumer would pay on that sale. So there's going to be a lot of moving parts as that moves forward. And so many things, and I learned this last year, as many of ours first session, with the way the bill starts when we file it, mine hasn't even come out of drafting yet. It's going to change in every committee stop that we go to. So just pay attention to how that changes throughout the process, and I'm sure the papers will give you information on how things move forward, and I'll be happy to take any advice or interest that you have in that.
And you have submitted, looked at it's not a reinvention of the wheel because there are a number of states out there that are already doing that. So we're looking at how their methodology as far as collection, because I think that would definitely be cutting back on, costs, because we don't need to reinvent.
What spurred a lot of this, and there was actually a Wall Street Journal article about it 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and there was a whole page article on the internet sales tax, and half the page was a person who was an expert for the tax or remittance of the tax, and the other half a page was somebody against it. So it's a national issue. California did it a year or two ago, and just by filing of the bill, then they started a conversation with Amazon, and Amazon, they came to an agreement and basically came to a concession on how it would affect them, and they prolonged the implementation against Amazon for a year or two. So it's kind of things that are moving throughout the country. Your chambers probably spent a lot of time going through the different provisions of this. And I can't tell you how many business groups and local business groups. I was in Orlando at a Florida Retail Federation annual convention, and the owner of Play It Again Sports came up to me and said, Representative Stubbe, this is a huge, important issue to me. And Play It Again Sports actually started here in the state of Florida. And he said to me, people come into my business and look at my baseball bats and look at my cleats and look at my weights and try them on and try them out. And then they go and they buy it online at Amazon, and I have to pay the tax, and they don't have to pay the tax. So it's a huge issue for them as well. I think we're going to balance out the consumer piece of it. So for the people that are purchasing those products, I don't think there's going to be a difference there for you. So the difference is going to be how we treat out-of-state retailers that are selling online versus in-state retailers that are selling online. Does that help?
Thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
And I encourage you all to look on the internet website, My Manatee Florida Project, or Google that, My Manatee Florida Project. My Main Street Florida Project, and you can get some more information on the internet sales loophole issue. A couple more questions. First up, I'm going to have Senator Bennett. A interesting topic that I've seen in the papers from you recently is about sports stadiums. I want to see my Bucks more. and I know you have an opinion on that. So,
You know, taxes and revenue and tax breaks are always a wonderful thing to talk about. But there's always two sides of the issue. And, you know, when we were talking about the internet sales tax just a second ago, how many people bought something last year on the internet? Raise your hand. How many of you people want to pay 7% more? Oh, hell, that's going to makes a little problem, doesn't it? And that's the issue, okay? Because if we do that, you're going to pay it, okay? That 7% that you're so happy, and yet you come to the chamber thing and say you got to do something about it, okay? Trying to figure that out. Another thing that's coming up on the internet sales tax, we do have some internet companies that have been sly enough to add it on to your purchase, and a lot of people have paid it, but they don't have any obligation to send it down here. Okay? So there's a little fraud issue there too. So as we work through this thing, make sure you understand there's what we give to you, we have to take away from someone else. And so when you complain about that internet sales tax, make sure that every purchase you made last year, if you're going to make it again this coming year, you're going to pay 7% more. And all of a sudden that takes the rosy picture off of it. So anything that we do when we put money into something, it takes away from something else. One of the bills that I'm working on this year, and we're trying to get it done, I've always been opposed to using taxpayers' money to support professional sports franchises and their stadiums. And it really irritates me that the Tampa Bay Bucks happen to get a couple $1 million a year tax break that you all pay for. And so, well, you know, we can't control the NFL. And the NFL says if they don't have a sold-out game or 75% or whatever it is, then it's not going to be on television. So consequently, if the Bucks don't sell out, and let's face it, they don't very often, but if they don't sell out, you're blocked out. But your taxpayer money goes to support them. Well, since I can't control the NFL, we're looking at doing it another way. And part of the bill will say, if you want that tax break from the state of Florida, if you want that $2 million, then we suggest the Tampa Bay Bucks go out and buy those tickets from themselves and give them away to kids and put it down here so the people in Manatee County can watch that Bucks game if they want to, instead of having it just come out of your pocket. I think that's a fair way to do it. Then something else that we found while we were going through this thing was really rather interesting. This goes back to 1988. In 1988 was the first time that the state of Florida really stepped up and gave a huge amount of money for a professional sports stadium, and it was the Dolphin Stadium. And the fact is they wrote them a check for $60 million. Well, there was a smart old boy down in Miami, happened to be a Democrat fella, and the Democrat fella said, you know what, at the last minute he slid an amendment in there. And the amendment in there said that if that stadium is not being used for a specific event, it must be used as a homeless shelter. Well, we got to resume looking at this, and we found out that nowhere in the state of Florida ever has it been done. We have given the professional sports franchises close to $600 million over the years. And so I filed legislation and said, if you did not do it, I want my money back. And I think that's fair. They've broken the law. And so right now we could use an extra $600 million. So if they haven't done it, I'm going after the Miami Dolphins for $120 million. I'm going after Orlando. I'm going after Jacksonville, and have explained to everybody that if my legislation doesn't pass, and if we don't get our money back, then I will work with somebody to institute a class action suit for the people of the state of Florida to get the money back in the budget. That's what they should have been doing. They broke the law. I want the money back. So that's where we're at on it.
And final comment from Representative Boyd on MTI.
Thanks, and Senator. So we're $1 billion short maybe with your deal. We've just found $600 million. That's awesome. I meant to mention it earlier in my comments, but I was getting the tug. So MTI, I wanted to just speak to that briefly because we know how important it is to this community and what it's done to this community. And several of, John, you spoke about it, Jane spoke about it, my friends on the border over here. You know, last year we worked hard, and Senator Bennett worked very hard in the Senate. Representative Galvano has worked hard through the years representing this community there. And we did get some movement toward equity. As you mentioned, John, we got another $1.9 million in funding. Chairman O'Toole has assured me, we've talked already, we've met, and she's assured me we're not done. You know, there is still an inequity. There's still communities that are getting more than their fair share, and there's still communities like us that are getting less than their fair share. Yes, $2 million was a nice shot in the arm, but we're still not where we need to be. So we're still going to work on it. I know your legislative team here helped us very hard with it last year. We're going to work on it again this year. Chairman O'Toole assures me that that was a start. We're not finished. So those are projects I think that will be going on and will be easy to kind of move along as we go through this next session. So I urge you and really ask you to continue the dialogue with them locally as well, because they know who you are, they know what you're doing, and that helps a lot too when they hear from you. So, but we'll keep the fight going up there because it is a very important part of our community. Thanks, Will.
Well, let's give a round of applause for our legislative delegation. Thank you so much. You want to say one thing?
Real quick, and it's thanking of a fellow member of the legislature up here. As you know, it's Senator Bennett's last pre-session chamber event, and he's been doing this now for 10 years, 2 years in the House, and then 8 in the 12 years. I just wanted to thank him publicly for his service to this community. I think he's done a wonderful job, and I know I speak for all the members of the delegation in thanking him for his mentorship, for his leadership, and for his service to our community. So I just wanted to give him a round of applause and publicly acknowledge him.
You're not done yet, though. A special thank you once again to Bright House Network for their continued support. Once again to our legislative delegation, great comments and thoughts and questions today. METV for televising today's event, and also the Braden and Country Club for today's wonderful breakfast. Good seeing you all. Have a happy holiday and have a wonderful Chamber of Commerce day. Thank you.